It's for very small people. Okay. I'm going to read two short things. One's really, really old, and one's really, really new. The first one I wrote like 8 years ago, and then I rewrote it like last year, and it was in Event a couple months ago. This is a short story. It's called Its Size. The day of the boy's 11th birthday, his father says, "Boy, it's time you became a man." Huh? "It's time you wrestled your first panda bear." So the boy is driven to the local zoo, where his father has something arranged with one of the zookeepers. I'm going to drink water a lot. Like, frequently, I mean, so. Okay, with one of the zookeepers. An old college roommate introduced as Red. "So you want to wrestle the giant panda, hey?" "I just want to be 11. "Aren't you 11? "Exactly." "Well, let's get the show on the road," says the father, and Red reappears with a black and white fur costume about the size of a boy. As the costume's zipper squeaks upward, the boy's thought, if verbalized, is something like, "What the heck is wrong with this world?" Their TV has told him about kids on the sides of milk cartons, tortured to death somewhere damp. He feels life to be very long and very large. He is led outside to the biggest cage. One big, huge, real-live panda sits inside. It yawns and itches its nose with the side of its claw. "He's vicious," says Red. But the boy sees Red is actually pointing at him. "No, I'm not." His father and Red have a good laugh. And then his father is opening the cage door with Red's keys. The boy's father, wearing his Tilly hat and khaki shorts as usual, looks an awful lot like any of the fathers of the boy's schoolmates, like any father he's ever seen. The father asks what exactly the boy is waiting for. The boy apologizes. There's a push at the back of the costume and he's in the cage. With the clink of the door's latch, the bear perks up. Its posture expresses confusion. Its size expresses itself. The boy doesn't move, and from just inside the cage's entrance, he mentally greets the bear. "Hello, Panda. I'm supposed to fight you. It's not my fault." The bear chomps a twig of bamboo and seems to say, "You don't even know me." Now it stands as tall as it can, twice the boy's height. It takes a forward step. The two men lean against the fence with their fingers curled through its holes, as if staring out a dugout. They cheer the boy on, using nicknames and pet names, seeming to claim that this is a boy certain to win, a boy who's already proven victorious in similar contests. The bear drops to all fours and takes another slow step, its paws the size of most human faces, leading with its claws. A shard of bamboo falls from its fur. Will it be wrestling, as they said, or will it be fighting? Because there's a difference. Inside the costume's mittens, sweat drips from the boy's fingertips. The enormous bear takes another step, and another. What is the boy going to do? The bear utters a whiny growl from deep in its throat. The boy risks a look at his father. Why can't the boy move? He's old enough to have learned David versus Goliath, Peter Pan's little paring knife against Hook's rapier. He knows all of existence now turns on his refusal to be a coward. He manages a stance vaguely related to wrestling. Now the bear comes in unthinkably close and obscures anything behind it, uprights itself and stares down, quivering wet lips, saying, "This is death, my little friend. It is slow, grisly, and humiliating." A massive black paw reaches out. Something heavy presses on his left shoulder, but he can't for the life of him lift his eyelids. There is a sweet smell, and he must be dead already. Not slow at all, just sudden and dark. But no, he can still feel. Here's the tension in his braced calves, his curled up toes, the weight on the shoulder, still. But no pain? He's jolted forward and engulfed in what can only be the animal, as if buried. That's not the end. It's just the paragraph, right? When he finally gets his eyes open, it becomes clear it's a hug. The bear stoops lower, a paw slides down his back, pulls him closer. The giant panda is hugging him. What seemed like 10 minutes pass like this before the boy's muscles give up and he buries his face in fur, yellowed white warmth and smell cradling him. He embraces as much bear as his arms allow, almost positive he's not dead. There's a hand somewhere at the back of the costume, and the boy lets go. Red steps in, scratches the bear's jaw, and says, "Good girl." It's a girl panda. On his flattened palm, Red offers her some kind of food reward. The boy is led out of the cage, still trembling. "She loves kids," the father says, "always has." Then again, says Red, "she thinks they're panda kids." The father says he bets she can tell the difference. "You're certainly a man now," he says, and he takes his son out for a chocolate ice cream that the boy doesn't finish. That's the end of it. There's probably some things I should fill you in on. There's no character names. There's two protagonists. So far, they're problematically called the male and the female. This one's from the male's point of view. He's 27. He's just before this been going through an unfortunate breakup, and he's just decided that he wants to leave the city that he lived in. And yeah, right before this, he was at a role play. He was at he was at a negotiation course in which there was a role play exercise that he participated in which he played the role of his ex-girlfriend and tried to empathize and see her point of view on the situation, hoping for some kind of catharsis. Anyway, so that's what just happened. And I'm going to say quote and unquote signal quotation marks. I'm sorry if that's pretentious. It's the only way I can figure out how to do it. Okay. Catharsis hadn't seemed to arrive during the role play, not in the way the male had hoped it might. The following day, however, after a particularly positive and encouraging session with his psychological counselor, the male, walking downhill on a busy main street beneath the most sunlight and skyward blue the city had seen in weeks, and finding himself smiling suddenly, began to perceive that his torso was much lighter than usual, or that perhaps his body was quickly deflating, and he sidestepped inside an empty bus shelter. Surrounded by thick glass on 5 sides and pale concrete on a 6th, and without questioning the impulse, the male placed a call to his ex-girlfriend. As it rang, he paced the length of the small shelter twice, before sitting in the middle of the 3-seater bench in a compressed posture, legs crossed at the knees, phone pressed to ear, elbow on thigh, free hand covering mouth, his grounded heel tapping rapidly and both legs vibrating. 25 seconds elapsed. That was only 4. Then his ex-girlfriend's voice startled him with its claim that she was not currently available, but that he could record a message for her that she might return later, after which came a brief electronic tone. He did not end the call. He stood, inhaled, and greeted her, identifying himself by name. He was sorry, he claimed. He knew he had lately been interacting with her purely out of anger and selfishness, and he wanted to apologize and to assure her that he wouldn't always be like this, that he knew he would one day be able to, quote, forgive, unquote, her, that he would, quote, change, unquote. At this point, he began to cry, and again sat in the same section of the bench. Aware that she would now hear congestion and shallow convulsions in the recording, he worried that his message might seem to take on an aspect of performance, that in the context of the recent emotional climate she might read it as hyperbolic or insincere, merely a speech, or worse, as only an instance of raw material for a story or memoir he might one day attempt to create from its memory, whereas to him it felt entirely unrehearsed, truthful, real. He attempted to suppress his self-spectation and self-doubt, and between quick sobs said that he hoped she would also one day find herself able to forgive him, and that he was sorry for being so emotional, but that he needed her to know. He placed emphasis on this section of the message by enunciating slowly, clearly, that he thought she was a kind, smart, beautiful, and exceptionally good person, that he sincerely loved her and truly wished only the best for her and her new lover, whom he called by name. He said a kind goodbye and ended the call. He inhaled and looked at the clear sky above the buildings and wiped his eyes with the back of his left hand. The recording had already been written to a disc in a rack on the 2nd floor of one of his ex-girlfriend's phone carrier's data centers, 27 kilometers to the west, when the male exited the shelter and walked toward his apartment, perceiving himself as weighing even less than earlier, occasionally smiling at passing pedestrians and nearly chuckling for no obvious reason, in feeling grateful for the sun and an experience of positivity, and vaguely wondering if it were possible he'd somehow entered a manic state. Stuff's a real mouthful, sorry. The second floor data center occupied 9,450 square feet and drew up to 4.8 megawatts of power. It featured a glycol-based cooling system, and its servers and storage arrays were monitored at all hours by both closed-circuit video and security personnel. An hour later, in his kitchen, the male received a text message from his ex-girlfriend thanking him for his message and claiming that she'd needed to hear it. She was glad he was feeling better and wished him luck with his move. Perhaps they could speak on the phone someday soon. In his bedroom, he lay on his back on his mattress and began crying anew. The following morning, he sat in the back seat of a rideshare van. With 5 large boxes and several black bags of his possessions packed behind him in the van's cargo hold, his bicycle slung atop the pile, seated next to a woman who intermittently screamed at the driver in a language the male didn't speak, and whom he semi-consciously assumed was the driver's wife or partner. The male listened via his phone to a percussionless indie rock song, which was in a minor key and which he secretly associated with melancholic/depressive periods of his adolescence. And as the van merged from a ramp onto the freeway, he began to view himself as a character in a dramatic narrative, and felt, not for the first time, that in a hypothetical narrative film about his life, or his youth, or at least about his relationship with his ex-girlfriend, that his current situation, experiencing strong emotions in this van, heading away from this city he disliked so much, could perhaps comprise one of the film's pivotal scenes, a scene he now imagined as scored with the slow indie rock song. He was embarrassed at himself. While he presumed it to be an extremely common fantasy, he couldn't help feeling that the conversion of a life into a private film must somehow impoverish the experience of that life. He sent a text message to a male friend in the city the van accelerated toward, announcing when he would arrive, then rested his head against the window, a posture he'd for many years felt to be particularly filmic, and attempted to focus on all the specific and immediate matter passing in front of his eyes. The salt-stained barricades and blue-gray guardrails streaming by so quickly they seemed animated. The ditches brook flowing into the tunnel, on whose arched mouth someone had painted a rainbow. The red sedan overtaking them in the wrong lane. And he decided that the only word to describe his emotional state seemed to be, quote, tender, unquote. There were 5 months, 2 weeks, and 6 days remaining in his life. That's the end.